Growing up, I knew no deaf people. I didn't even know what deafness was. I saw people moving their mouths and talking, and that's what I figured I needed to understand and decipher to communicate. And then I found out about a school with about 500 deaf people, so a deaf school that was. So I went there. I skipped out person. Okay, now we have Mark. My family could all hear. I grew up in South Dakota. Near an Indian reservation. My father worked for the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So I contracted German measles when I was 3 and became deaf at that point. My parents wondered what to do. They suggested I go to oral school. My father wanted me to speak. His background was in education, so he had that as a goal for me. My mother knew about a good oral school in Seattle, so my family drove from South Dakota to visit, and we found the school, and this was probably when I was around 4 or 5. As I went into the school, I saw, no people of color at that school. It was pretty much all white people. No Indians or Native Americans, so it's a little bit disconcerting to me. I met a teacher who came up to me and began to speak very slowly and demonstratively to try to get me to understand what they were saying, which was disconcerting. And thinking about this, I really had no idea what I was getting into and how I was going to be able to communicate. My parents were not sure it was the best fit for me either. And it was determined that I should go to a school for the deaf, which, to be honest, was a relief to me. The school I went to, the School for the Deaf, had an oral program and a speech reading program as well, so that satisfied my parents, and I was happy to be there. They investigated Washington School for the Deaf, New Mexico School for the Deaf, and several others to try to find a place where there was a Bureau of Indian Affairs and job nearby, and he found a job at a town where there was a deaf school. So my family packed up and moved to that. Some of my siblings were disappointed in having to move just because we were going to a place where there was a school for me, but we moved to that area, and there was a reservation, Indian reservation nearby, and that put us all at ease because it was all Native people, or mostly Native people in that community. Um, the school for the deaf, I think, was probably about 5 when I was put into that school, maybe 5 years old. In the spring, I remember, and the school was pretty much all white kids, and their hands were moving around like crazy. It was not something I had ever seen before. I was really frustrated and upset and just wanted to come home. I was, wondering how I was going to communicate. I actually don't remember how I communicated with my parents at that time. I don't think it was through sign language, I'm not sure, but I was not comfortable with that. But I eventually did become more comfortable. I found a little boy of color who I felt like I could relate to. Many of the kids went home for the summer, except for him. We stayed for the summer, and I got to know him and became more comfortable with the place. I stayed for a number of years, and then I noticed in the classrooms, many of them required speech reading as part of the instruction, but in the dorms is where you communicated through sign language. That's where you really were exposed to culture. Really interesting dichotomy, having this, all this technology and everything to support whatever hearing we did have, and support being able to understand language through auditory channels. This was back when the equipment was pretty cumbersome. It was just really disgusting, and you really had to suffer through it to get whatever information you could get. And this was a deaf school. Pretty interesting. My brothers and sisters, interestingly, at their school, it was a different school, of course, and I noticed that they were progressing, and I really wasn't. I felt like it wasn't fair. I wanted to go to a place where they were, like where kids were really learning things and progressing, but I was told, it was decided that I stay at my school. I'm not sure what benefit it was for me to stay at that school. There was, good opportunity, with being exposed to other kids who could use sign language, but I don't really know what I got as far as deeper understanding of education. It wasn't until I got into the world that I understood the difference between socializing and being isolated. So it wasn't really, I actually graduated and went to high school, and I actually, in retrospect, realized it was a good benefit for me to be at that school and get that exposure. We have Maryland. I grew up going to a deaf school. I started when I was 4 years old. I'm not really sure if I was born deaf. There is, some history of that in my family. My mother's parents were both deaf. There were grandparents and uncles and so forth, and cousins that were deaf in that family. So maybe that's where I got it from. My mother could hear, but she had, of course, a lot of hearing relatives, and that gave me sort of a jump start. I went to a deaf school. Graduated from that school. Went to a high school, graduated from there, and my brothers and sisters were all used sign. There were 5 of us. My older sister could sign, deaf brother. I have a brother who's in computer, another was a teacher or teaches computer science. I have a hearing brother, hearing sister, and then I'm the baby. So all of them could hear but could sign. I'm not really sure if it was pure ASL, it was whatever, the Chaffee family signs that we came up with. But I did pick up ASL elsewhere. And this is David. Not really sure how I became deaf. My parents could hear. My mother and father, not really sure where it might have come from, might have been genetic. Pretty much no hearing loss in the family that we know of. Maybe there was a deaf gene, recessive in the family. 3 of us in the family, 3 of my siblings, including me, were deaf. My brother, at 6, went to a school for the deaf. The doctor suggested that he go to that school. My sister went to that school as well. And then I went to the school as well later.